Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa with me, Chantelle, your hostess with the mostest. Definitely awesome guests and viewers, as tonight is again testament to our amazing Beverli Rhodes, who's going to be joining me in just a minute. But before I go ahead, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you as well, all the beautiful wenches with wrenches and newbies to the show as well. I see some new names around there. Welcome, nice to see you all. And yeah, we're certainly in for a beautiful treat with Beverli tonight again. But before I do, I just want to make one or two announcements for the week, please. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Central Africa time, I was supposed to be chatting with Juliet Rose Bryant, who's this ex-South African model who was an Epstein sex slave on Epstein Island for quite a while. She'll be doing an interview with me as well. So please join us for that if you can. I think it's also very interesting, the timing now when we've just been told there is no flight list, right? Let's see what Juliet has to say. I think it might be very interesting. And then on Thursday, Dr. Dennis won't be here, but I have Thursday Samantha Plested, question and answer. I'm not doing that as a membership show because, as you all know, the channel was struck for a few weeks and I've got lots to catch up on. So Thursday, instead of Dr. Dennis, Samantha Plested, the beautiful transsexual woman who I interviewed a couple of weeks back, she'll be doing a Q&A. So please join us for that. Any question you want to answer around that, she is more than happy to share with us around that as well. So please join us there. Then Friday at 5 p.m. Central Africa time, we are doing, if you guys remember, also a few weeks back, I interviewed this amazing lady, Mandy Vermaak, who is head of the Life Wave here in South Africa. That's the X39 patches. We're going to be doing a closed meeting on Zoom, and we're doing it closed because she can't talk about certain things live without jeopardizing whatever they're allowed to share, and obviously what YouTube allows us to listen to, because previously I was struck for medical misinformation when sharing about I think it was a Spooky 2 product. So I will put that out there, but please join us. She's going to be talking about that amazing product, and it's also a business opportunity. That's the LifeWave patches. So please join us on Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock Central African time with Mandy Vermaak. And yes, that's just for now, the announcements for the week. And of course, just to speak, thank you so much, Magda. So appreciate you for your super sticker. Yay. Sapphire in the house. Don't we love the sapphires in the house? So appreciate you, Magda. Thank you. And then I want to just say, last week when Beverli was on the show, we spoke about Gert van Rooyen. And I realized afterwards, in my excitement and my passion of having someone amazing like Beverli to speak to, I actually forgot to give you guys context. So I just want to give you context because Beverli is going to be touching on a lot of these things this evening as well. Gert van Rooyen was a pedophile, and between 1988 and 1989, he was accused of capturing 6 girls, young girls, all between the ages of 9 to 16. And the only way he got caught was because the last victim, a young girl called Joan Boyson, who was actually age 16, but she was quite a bit smaller than the normal 16-year-old. So I do believe they probably thought she was younger. And she actually escaped. And then she alerted the police. And then sometime in 1990, I think it was January, maybe, beginning of 1990, Gert van Rooyen and his mistress, Joey Haroff, were then found murder-suicided, But interesting, where he apparently killed her and then took his own life. But interesting is that he had a bullet to the back of the head, which I'm not so sure if you're going to be suiciding yourself, you're going to be doing it that way. Impossible? No, but probably not very likely. So, of course, that raised the question about who really has been involved with these child trafficking rings. We certainly pointed some fingers to some ministers who are no longer alive in this country at the moment. So Beverli has had a 25-year indictment where she can't speak. This is the first time she's speaking about what's been happening here back in those years. And of course, can only mention people that are deceased. So we can't mention all the names, only those who are deceased. And our Minister of, for those of us who South Africans, we're going to remember, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Pakbueta. That name came up, didn't it? And Minister of Defense, Magnus Milan. Interesting. Anyway, guys and girls, without any further ado, ta-da, the awesome Beverli Rhodes. So wonderful to have you back, Beverli. How are you? You're on mute.
I just realized, yes, it was on mute. Sorry. Yeah. It's been one of those days, you know, things that can go wrong with technology have gone wrong.
Beverli. It's also a special day for you today, isn't it? Today is the anniversary of 7/7, obviously a good day. I love the number 7, but I know in your situation it was a really, really tragic day of the underground bombings that happened in the UK?
London underground bombings.
London.
London underground.
And
so it was known as the London bombings eventually, because it was mainly the various underground stations, and then one bus stop that was blown to shreds, which was, so unfortunately for me, it's 20 years today, and it's a key milestone, because if I hadn't have been caught up in that, I wouldn't have been blown up and knocked unconscious and being on the floor, and I wouldn't have had such a severe blow to my head and my face, causing broken bones and a cheek to break and all these, and jawbone and all those other horrible things. But what was important for me was it then decided, through the bang on the head, it woke up all these awful memories that I had pushed so deep down inside myself that I didn't remember. So that was the SRA and the CSA. All of those aspects started coming out when they were dealing with us in the hospital, all the survivors. And I was sort of seeing things and hearing things and getting all these weird images coming forward. And I was thinking, what is that I'm seeing? This isn't the PTSD from being blown up. This is something else. And that's when the two merged together to form the 10-year period of recovery, because I was not just seeing seven London bombings in the train. I was also seeing everything that was done to me by Patrick Daniel, the handler. All of that started filtering through and flooding through. The gates were open, and I must say, it was like the gates of hell, like the hellhounds themselves came out, because I thought, what on earth is this? And that was it. It had been pushed down so far that I hadn't remembered a lot of it. I knew I didn't like him. I knew I didn't want to be anywhere near him, and changed countries. But all of the detailed information that started flowing forward at one hell of a rate of knots, I hadn't remembered all of that. So it's a big day for me.
Wow. And that was 20 years ago today. And here we are. Wow. I mean, I think God works in such mysterious ways. Really, I do. And I think the level of trauma you must have experienced as a child, and obviously, especially with your gifts, your spiritual gifts being abused to the point that they were as well. I have no doubt you must have buried that so deep in your psyche that it would have taken the London bombing to literally bring it to the surface. So
I agree.
bless
I
you for
agree,
being
yeah.
here, and thank you for being here. I know that it's not easy, and I think today must be difficult. So sending lots of love and prayers your way.
Oh,
And
thank you.
just again, thank you for being part of this channel and for sharing your amazing testimony.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, I didn't go to the memorial this morning. They have a set of standing stones in London, and they were busy. They were going to lay flowers and do all sorts of things, which is usually I will go and I will lay a wreath and I will speak to all my fellow survivors and say hello to everybody. But I just felt today I wasn't prepared to go all the way into London, and it was just one of those. I thought, no, I'd rather just think about it quietly and think on what needs to be done for the next sort of 10 years forward, and how do I need to change my life in order to deal with things better than I have perhaps, and make sure that I'm not triggered by stuff, because yes, it's 20 years ago, but there are some of the triggers from the complex PTSD do still hang around. There's one or two over the last week or so. There was one that came, I thought, what? I'm seeing that and I'm thinking, no. Why am I getting triggered by that? It's still 20 years later. It still catches me out today. As they say, eet gevang. Yeah, it's definitely, it bites me in the bottom every now and then.
Now I'm on mute. I'd be surprised if we're having a Saturday today. Firstly, a little bit on African time, yeah. Muting ourselves. Those days are over. We are no longer muting ourselves. Right?
No.
Wow. But wow. I mean, what would, maybe you can, just as an introduction to help us that don't know the view, because I know a lot of our viewers are American as well. Maybe you can share with us what the 77 London underground bombing was actually, or bombings were about.
Yeah, well, it was obviously took place in London in the central business district, and what they did is they had very carefully planned a number of attacks on the underground itself, and they then the bombers then went, because they were unsuccessful. I think they had gone to Euston Street Station and they were trying to get onto that train, but they weren't able to do that. So they had to dash off that with their rucksacks and then get onto the next available bus, which was a bus that was going down to Tavistock Square. And they had to sit very quietly with all their paraphernalia in their rucksacks and do nothing until they got to the point where they saw a lot of people were going to be getting off, which is at Tavistock Square. And that's when they detonated that bomb. So it's a very unusual type of bombings, because they were all within like a few hours of each other. The first one went off quite early in the morning, and then the rest of them all went off at different times, right up until sort of the lunchtime. So if you have a look at it tells you the timeline, what they hit first and how they went about it. So it was to create maximum carnage, maximum damage, and create absolute chaos, which they successfully were able to do. But then I think when they couldn't get to the last train, they went and put another one on a bomb, and they veered off the plan, so to speak. So that was what was happening in London. But I think the fallout from all of those attacks was quite interesting, because instead of the City of London making plans to create a safer environment, so Transport for London and London Underground, because there was that switch where they had just taken over management of the trains and various other things, they didn't necessarily decide that they would change the security measures and that they would add additional security. So over the years, after the bombing attacks took place, we then formed a survivors group, which was people that all the different survivors got in touch. And we had a lot to do with number 10 Downing Street. And we spoke about what we as survivors had seen that we felt should have been part of the measures in the tunnels on the platform. Because if you've ever been to the tunnels, they're quite, the platform's quite thin, but also you have this silly little, first aid kit. And when people had been going up to the first aid kit and opening it during all the trouble, there wasn't anything in there. So we were saying things like that. Please make sure you keep the first aid kits stocked on all, just something as simple as that. Get bandages in there, get scissors in there, get things that you would be able to use. And if necessary, defibrillators, so that if someone's, heart was stopping, that at least if somebody knew how to use it, they could use it. And this sort of information was stuff that, as survivors, we were giving to the Greater London Assembly, and we were talking at the London Assembly, which is a huge amphitheatre with, retractable seats and a circular area at the bottom where, you'd all sit as survivors and talk about what we felt would make a difference or could have made a difference to us when we were stuck in the underground battlefield. And that was all part of the change that needed to take place. But that still hasn't been done, unfortunately.
Wow. Do you think that the changes will be implemented as time goes on? Or do you think that was really just a PR movement to say that or make those promises?
I think that a lot of the minor changes, so the ones that weren't costly, some of them have been implemented. And the previous Deputy Mayor of London, Richard Barnes, who's now retired, who became, through all of this, through us trying to make a change, became a really good friend of mine. And I think that he was pushing for those changes, which he did manage to do. But then you've got individuals like ex-prime ministers and others that were saying it's not necessary, you don't have to do this, and it's fine, it's sufficiently secure and safe to be able to use the underground, to use these facilities. So I think it's going to take a very long time. And because it's 20 years now, nothing much has changed. The underground is still stinky, it's still very hot. It still doesn't always run completely on time. There's always arguments and things like that. It's still exactly the same as what it was from 20 years ago. So it's going to take another 10, 15 years for them to make the changes that they need to make. By the way, did you know that 7th of July London bombings was exactly 911 days since 9/11 incident? Just saying.
No
Yeah.
way.
911 days from 9/11 takes you to 7th of July 2005. So when we're looking at, unusual number configuration,
I am blown away, because that has to, explosion. I mean, there's just one explosion after the other, right? So there has to be some kind of a correlation there. What's your take on that, Beverli? Why do you think that is so? I mean, guys, that's amazing. I'm just seeing can you see the chat, Beverli, by the way?
I can see something on the side here. I can see
Okay, all right, no.
Me and other Ziva. There's Aquana as well. And Salma is in the chat too. Yeah, this is a bit wild. It is wild. It is. And everything in this, well, this, Shanti, everything in this universe is numerically connected. In numbers and mathematics is part of the fabric of the universe. Apart from soul language or light language, the fact that, because when I looked at that and thought, hang on a minute, 911 days since 9/11 to 7/7. What's that about? So that tells us that everything was connected. It's a scary thought, but it was. And then I started looking at things very differently. I thought, well, I originally saw them as two separate things, totally separate. But then when you realize you've got these connections, and you start thinking, well, what about this one? What about Grenville? What about all these other huge the tsunamis? What about all these other events throughout the world? And I started looking for numerical, mathematical equations that could link things together. Because when you look at Earth and you look at, our consciousness, then some of those energetics and some of those mathematical equations, they do link us all together.
I mean, the fabric of the universe is maths and sacred geometry. I mean, so everything, I mean, it's just, yeah, that is what it is. So, and these guys obviously know that as well. So they would be taking things, playing it out according to the mathematical rhythms, if you will. I mean, that's insane. I would love to do a deep dive into that.
I think it's good to do a deep dive in the numerology of 7th of July 2005 London bombings, and then do another matrix deep dive into 9/11 and what happened there, and have a look and see what are the correlations between the two, because I think the matrix numerology would definitely bring those two together, and Shannon does that.
That would be amazing. I mean, that would absolutely be amazing. And guys, just I know Beverli will give you just her details at the end of the show, but if you can just see in the meantime her information scrolling down the bottom of the screen, and that as well is her website that just come up onto the screen. Now, I just want to go back to you on a personal level on the 7/7 bombing. I know that we said earlier on that was really when your memory started surfacing. It took that explosion for your embedded memories to literally start surfacing, which was then like the floodgates opening up. So I'd love to hear from you physically, how you dealt with that bombing, spiritually, how you dealt with this floodgate of information that was surfacing suddenly out of nowhere, and how did you deal with it? Someone was asking earlier on, Tammy, I think, and I'll pop that on the screen, your triggers. And as I'm sure you know, there are a lot of survivors on this channel. Yeah. So your triggers for... How do you handle your triggers? Do you use specific method to help you deal with them? And maybe you wouldn't mind sharing that part of your experience with us as well.
Oh, it's a good question, Tammy. How do you handle your triggers? Do you use specific methods? That's an awesome one. Yes. I generally, with a trigger, because with complex PTSD, you've got 4 different types of ways in which you can respond to a trigger when it starts. But my specific trigger mechanism is that I freeze, which was always the same way, with the SRA and all of the, sadistic individuals. I just used to freeze, and I just used to count in my head and then wait for it to go over. And then I think, okay, it's finished now, and now I can move on. But also what I did was I used emotional freedom technique, which is the EFT, the tapping, where you tap, 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 and you tap, tap, tap. And what I do is with my thumb, I've imprinted in my thumb a particularly really positive memory with my horses, which is like the best memory ever for me. And I put that into my thumb, and then I press the 2 together, and then I press it really hard. So I've got 2 sets of memories in each of my thumbs, and I press those. So if there's something that's triggering me to a point where I think I'm going to go off on one, or I'm going to lose it, which happens sometimes, then this is what I do. As I end up, if you see me sitting like this, something's happened. But that's what I do. So I use emotional freedom technique, and I've also done a lot of timeline review, where I've gone back into the timeline and I've looked at what was happening during the bombing situation. I've gone and looked at some of the worst situations with the SRA, and all of the aspects that were happening with the children, including myself. And I was going back into the timeline and clearing and wiping and moving and cleaning away the timeline, so that over those 10 years of doing all that work, and also the additional sort of 3 or 4 years of shadow work, where I've worked on myself behind the scenes, I've made sure that I've moved a lot of that out, so that when something happens, it doesn't always trigger me to such a degree that I fall on the floor, because that is what used to happen. And I've stopped that. I've managed to deal with that. So now it's just the excellent thumb memory tool. Yeah, it is. It's a good one. That's the one. It works. People think that, they think, oh, EFT tapping, what can that do? It does. It works. Well, it worked for me. I don't know if it worked for anybody else, but it worked for me. It was really, really good. I can highly recommend it, especially if you are getting triggered and you need something that you can hold on to for that short period of time until you get over that trigger point. Luckily for me, the triggers, there's 4. It's the emergency responding team. So it's an ambulance, a helicopter in the sky to remove the wounded, and it's the fire brigade, and it's the police. So it's all 4. So the chances of me actually having all 4 first responders come to an event is actually quite low. But initially, the first sort of 4 or 5 years, if I would hear the cop cars going, or if I would hear a fire engine, the helicopter, yes, I used to look up and think, oh, and then immediately I'm transported straight back to what I saw when we came out of the underground. There's everything. It was everybody all at once. It was absolute chaos. So luckily, there's not many incidents in life where you will have all 4 first responders, coming to the aid of the general public. So I don't have those many, but I have little tiny ones that are memories from the past, through childhood, individuals. I had one the other day and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I'll explain this one too, because it really, for me, it took me by surprise, because I thought, this was it. In front of me, there was one of those horrible plastic sliding doors. And before I escaped, that plastic sliding door used to be the sliding door on my room. And the reason why they changed the standard door was because my handler used to keep on putting his foot through it, because I used to lock the door, and because I didn't want to go out on a job. So he used to put his foot through the door. So Madam of the house decided, you know what, we're going to take that door down, because I'm sick and tired of having to get somebody in because the door was smashed. You will go, you will be a good girl. These are the ones you're servicing today. Come on, in the car, off we go. So that door disappeared. And they put in its place the most awful, ugliest Marley concertina door. The ones with the little wheels at the top that go squeak, 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 squeak. That, they put it in its place. This last week, on the weekend, there was somebody that was on a call with me. We were chatting about something, and I looked up, and Stru's Bob, what was in the background? A Marley door. Oh my gosh. And there it was. And I'm like, what? And I was taken straight back to the time that I nearly dawned her with a stick, because she said to me, no, you did it. And she was really, she was ready to get stuck into me because I wouldn't do what they wanted me to do. And he'd walked out the room, and they had this broom, and the broom was the broom of truth. Is, you will get hit with the broom until you do as you're told. Fine. But remember, by this time I'm like 15 something, and I've very, very long hair. So my hair's flying around like a banshee because it's down to my bottom. And that's the only piece of privacy that I ever had, is I'd put my hair over my mounds, and it would go pretty far down. So I had that's the only privacy that I would ever have. And that's why I grew my hair so long, is cover these bits up, because then they can't see them. And they started, and eventually I just said, I think it was the final moment where, you get to a point where there's like, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think that he had wanted me to go out on, I think, 3 or 4 more jobs. And I'd had enough. I really had enough. I was in pain. It was sore. I couldn't sit down, which was even worse, which means, if you can't sit down on your own bed and you can't sit on the loo to go for a loo break, I think it means that you've overused that tool a little bit too much. And maybe it should be, give it a rest now, you think. And I just thought there's just no way. There was absolutely no way that I can actually take any more of this. And that was it. I just stripped. I lost it. So I grabbed the broom and I took the broom. And I really don't know, because I was very slight. I'm very tall, but I'm very slight. I was very slight. And I took the broom and I went up to her and I said, I will effing end you. And I took the broom and I whacked it over my leg, and the broom just shattered in half. And I took both sides and I said, if you ever come near me again with this effing broom, you're going to choir practice, mate. Seriously. You're off to choir practice. If you come near me, I will effing kill you. And then she was like, oh. And that was it. And they both sort of looked at me as if to say, maybe the worm has turned. And that was the beginning of the end, because they were very worried about whether they should say anything to me or do anything to me or even approach me. They went out of that awful Marley door. They pulled the door closed. That was it. And I heard the click of the little key, because there's this stupid tiny little key on this flimsy little handle. I tell you something, I tried to get out of that door, and as flimsy as they are and as awful as they are in plastic, you cannot get through a plastic sliding door. Trust me, I know. So I was stuck in my room, and I thought, right. And then I thought, let's get a plan. And I did. So anytime there was any money that changed hands, or I'd ask for extra money, I'd make sure that money came to me. And then underneath my drawer, there was a little drawer. And underneath the drawer, I'd have press stick, which is also like blue tack, and I'd push it up underneath the drawer, and that's where my stash money would be. And I decided then and there, this is going to stop, and I don't care what happens to me. I'm taking the money and I'm gapping it, and I'm getting out of here, and I really don't care. I will go into the city, and you know what? What's the worst that can happen? Let's face it. After what I'd been through, what's the worst that can happen? And that was the plan that I hatched. And that was the broom breaking incident. Was like, that was the end of it for me.
Where were you living at this point when that happened?
That was in a place called Springs, and which is about, I think it's probably about 2 hours outside of Joburg. I think it's on the Witwatersrand.
Wow.
It's Gauteng.
I know exactly where Springs is. It's way out going towards the east there.
Yeah, it's East Rand.
And so, yeah. So you guys, and then you left. Did you actually run away then?
Yeah, I did. I got caught like an idiot. But anyway, yeah, I was walking. I managed to get out. I had planned it, and I managed to get a decent amount of money together, enough to be able to keep me in a hotel or to keep me somewhere in town in Joburg, so that I would be able to find my feet, get some sort of a job or do whatever. And I got out of the house. It was probably quite late. It was about 10:30, 11, really dark. And I managed to make it across to the main road. And I'd started walking down the main road, really just with an attitude like you've never seen. I mean, if you think that someone can walk with a strop, I was as stroppy as hell, a major stroppy mare, just full of it. And I thought, right, that's it. This is what I'm doing. All right. And I was heading towards the train station in the middle of Springs, which was a really, really old sort of 1940s, 1950s rail station. And I'm heading towards the traffic lights, or the robot, heading to the robot and get to the next robot to cross over to carry on going. And this green vehicle comes flying up on the side. And this is one of the band members, because I used to also sing in a band. he pulls up next to me. This is Selwyn. And he says to me, where are you going? We haven't got a gig. Are you walking to his house? I said, no, I'm not walking to your house. I'm going somewhere else. So he said, well, you can't be out at this time of the night. Let me just, let me take you home. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, please. And I said, no, I'm going to the station. So he said, well, where are you going at this time of night? Who are you going to go and see? This is ridiculous. Go and do whatever you've got to do it tomorrow. Oh, for goodness sake. So he was like, nya, 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 nya. And anyway, got in the car, and then he took me back. And he said, shall I ring the bell for you, and your mom and dad can come to the. I said, no, it's all right, don't worry, I'll go through the gates, and huge gates. I mean, they are ginormous, huge 8-foot walls and big gates with 2 Christmas trees on the side. And I'm like, oh, for goodness sake. So that was out of the park. So he thought he was, good Samaritan, bless him, and took me home, thought he was doing everyone a favor. 40 years later, I had a discussion with him, and he said to me, what actually happened on that day? He says, I've got your book. He says, this is terrible. He says, you should have told me what was happening to you. And I said, really, Selwyn, I could tell you now what was happening. What would you have done? You would have gone off on one, and then you would have just completely lost it, and then where we would be. So he was very upset that he never knew. But he was one who knew then afterwards what had been going on, but only 40 years later.
Wow. So where did you run to? And you went home again?
I went to Joburg. But luckily the next time, by the time I got everything together, and I had a lot more money. I mean, in those days, I think I must have had about 300 or 400 rand, which in those days, that was like in the early 70s.
That was money.
That was a lot of money. That was a lot of money. It really was.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when we still had 1 rand notes. Really.
Exactly.
Those horrible brown ones. Yeah. But 1 rand note, you could still get a cool drink with that. And so I went up to Joburg and managed to find a place to stay with a fantastic little old lady who stayed in Hillbrow. Now, I must say, in Hillbrow, those days, you had the latest of the latest, beautiful Ponte, which is a round building with all the flats in it. And it's just to be. Oh, do you remember Ponte was like, wow, look at Ponte. This is an amazing building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Hillbrow was a cool spot. We were always at Bella Napoli, babe. Bella Napoli on a Friday night.
Yeah, Bella Napoli. And then the downstairs and of course, Café de Paris. All these places work at Café de Paris, serving tables. And then I got hooked into doing some of the croupiering at some of the casinos, the illegal ones that were underground. Those, and ended up fitting in really well to, the nightlife and working at nights, not working during the day. So, yeah, I managed to do that quite well. And they were pretty lackadaisical with working out, how old are you? Do you have the right to work? They didn't do all that in those days. It was cash in hand. And, because the staff turnover was so, they didn't worry about that. So, yeah, that was it. So I ran really well and good. And I never went back. Never.
When did you, when at the time that you left your parents, your handler.
The handlers,
Had you your memories, were you aware at that stage of what your childhood had been about?
I think I must have been, because it was just, I remembered the last few jobs because they were the last few jobs, because they were people that were very famous at the time in South Africa. And he had been getting a lot of calls from specific people. And these were the ones that were the last few jobs that I had to do before I gapped it, before I ran. And I remember thinking at the time, why are you doing this? And I said to him, is it what, did you hate me that much? Did you hate me that much that you'd forced me to do this all these years? And he said, no. He says, I didn't hate you. He says, you were just there. Who knew? And he says, and also remember, you don't fit. You don't fit. You don't fit into our family. So as far as he was concerned, his family was his child, fruit of his loins, his wife, and him. And he said, you were never going to fit. You don't look like us. You don't walk like this. You don't have the same body structure as us. You don't look like us at all. So you didn't fit. You never were going to fit. So we had to make sure that you paid for yourself. So, yeah, I did pay for myself.
And that is, and the mom, she was aware, right? Your aunt,
I think she was aware. I mean,
sister,
I don't know where
your
she thought, sister. Yeah, I don't know where she thought, you know, and I'm talking rolls of cash. And it's like rolls of cash like this, rolls of cash in elastic bands. You know, not a money clip or anything as fancy as that, just a roll of money with elastic bands around it. So, you know, you kind of think of this and you think, well, where did she think the money came from? Does she think that the money came from going and putting in flooring or putting in someone's roof? Because he still carried on with all those shenanigans, which was the front to be able to have, you know, the various pedo parties at this place and that place. Oh, we're putting in the kitchen, or we're putting in the floor, or we're putting in a bathroom, or we're doing all the gutterings and we're doing the roof. And you if you had a look, you'd see, if you ever looked at the order book, let's say, and the addresses of the order book where goods were delivered, and then cross-reference that to the sites that I was taken to as well as the other children, guess what? They'd match. So it's a front.
little front. There's so much to get into, but what I'd like us to maybe talk about tonight again, and just maybe touch on some of the stuff we spoke about last week, which of course was your confirmation that Nelson Mandela, in fact, did die in prison. Is there anything else you can share with us around that we maybe don't know about that?
I think what is key with this is to understand the level of cover-up and how many people would have been involved with that. And particularly those that were in and around the prison. Many were paid off. That was common knowledge. It was an open secret, actually, across the prison. And individuals that didn't play ball or felt that they wanted to say something, you know, they ended up swimming with the fishes, because that was pretty much what it was. It wasn't something that was going to ever become known. It was something that they needed to cover up, and a secret like that is significant. And if you really start looking for the evidence, you will find the evidence, because it is there. Not everybody was able to keep quiet to the level that it was expected.
Wow. I mean, it is. I mean, as you say, it's not just the cover-up.
No.
It's the extent of the cover-up, and it's the the amount of people involved in these things. And we were saying, I think you were saying last week, he had like 4 doppelgangers. So these guys are literally born into the system, groomed by the system. So just like the American Illuminati, Cabal, Luciferian system, it's exactly the same that they've been doing for the longest time. Absolutely.
It is. The interesting thing about the Mandela lookalike is the one thing which I had said to, somebody said it to me, it was like, have a look at the ears, because the ears, you know, when you do biometrics, because I eventually went into security and was doing like the London Olympic securities with the big consultancy company. And they were saying to me, well, what biometrics are we going to use? And obviously there's different types of biometrics. One of the biometrics, apart from your eyes, because that's obvious, is venology. So it's your veins on the top of your hands, because that's unique to every human being, or any being. Doesn't have to be human, can be other. Other one that's very unique is your ear. Your ear is very unique. If you look at the original pictures of Nelson Mandela, the original, and then you have a look at the person that took his place, The ears are totally different.
Right. No,
So,
totally.
yeah.
And I've done a show on Nelson Mandela, in fact, with Jesse Zabota, perhaps about a month ago. So if you guys haven't seen that, they are actually put up a lot of information. The guy that died is actually a guy called Gibson Makandla, who was a Zimbabwean man who played the role of Mandela for many, many years. All his whole life, basically.
Yeah.
And I guess, gosh, anyway, it's good to know. The next thing we spoke about was Gert van Rooyen and the girls, the 6 girls that were taken. And of course, the last one who escaped and alerted the police, which literally led to Gert van Rooyen and Joey Haroff doing this murder-suicide thing, which I honestly do not believe was that. I do believe, because the reports back at that time was saying that she was luring the girls. I do believe that they were involved in entrapping the kids, for sure. You know, she is the woman. It is much easier for a woman to seduce the child, you know, much, especially in those days. We were never ever alerted to these things the way that they are now, you know. So women calling you and being kind and all mommy or granny like, you know, child trusts. Children are very trusting. And these children, the youngest one I think was 9. And the others were all about, between 11 and 12. And then Joan Boyson was 16. But because she was smaller, they thought she was probably younger.
Yeah, I think they thought that Joan was about, I think they thought, well, when you see the pictures of her, even I looked at it, oh Lord, this is also a young one, but it's not. And because she was very underdeveloped as well, and she was very slight in her frame, so she looked about 13 or 14. She definitely didn't look 16. But Joey Haroff had that energy about her, that you know, mummy energy, that she could entrap the children quite easily, and you know, get and gain their trust. And I think there's nothing worse in my book. In my book, there's nothing worse than a woman that is entrapping children and bringing about being one of these types of supporters that will support these men because they think that they're doing the right thing, or they're wanting this man to love them so much that they will entrap children and allow the suffering to take place. For me, that's like the ultimate betrayal is for a woman to do that to a child.
Exactly. And you know, also bear in mind, you know, guys, this was sort of this was at the time when our politics was just changing. This country was at a pivotal point when these things were happening. We were so gullible in this country. And I mean, yes, the African people had been horrifically abused. As white people in this country, we were so gullible. And all these things we're talking about now was at the time that the politics was changing. These guys were coming in, sanctions were removed. International investors were coming in for the first time ever in my life, right? We were, international movie stars were coming here, international singers. I even saw Bryan Adams. I mean, I was working on his show when he was practicing his gig. I mean, we had a chat. I took him a Coke, you know. I mean, I stood there watching them practice for their gig. I was like blown away. It's like he was playing for me all on my own. Summer of 69.
You got lucky.
I got very lucky. I got very lucky with Bryan Adams there, boy. listening to them practice. But, you know, that's what I'm saying. We were like, at that time where, as a nation, we were excited. Mandela was coming out. Our country was at a turning point. I mean, in the referendum, which, mind you, at that point, still only whites could vote, 94% of us voted for him to come out of prison. That's how overwhelming it was that we wanted change in this country. So we were absolutely, raped in the worst possible way by these creatures, because that's obviously when your Patrick Rhodes, right, was in there, and they were bringing up the child trafficking rings, and we are going to talk about that. But I'd love to just know more about this whole Gert van Rooyen case. And again, I've always said it was not him. There were politicians involved. This was part of a much, 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 much bigger ring. And the Spinnacorp, which is the spider in English, was a criminal network really for politicians, or these high up guys like the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts, and all of them are part of that, right? All the mafiosa stuff. And they just traffic everything. Cyril Ramaphosa has 5 illegal hunting farms. I mean, seriously, do you think he's not trafficking animals? You've got to be joking. So let's just look
not
at it
just
like
animals.
that.
I think children too. You know, if you've
Of
got 5
course.
trafficking farms, it's definitely not just animals that you're taking out. He's probably got one of the hunts, you know, and that's not animals that are hunted there. That's, you know, the 2-legged variety, most definitely.
Exactly.
But you are right. It was such a country that was completely innocent and naive, and this is where, you know, those that were coming in from the outside with their influences, particularly those that were coming from the larger organizations like the UK, where they had this type of aspect in place for years. And people were, in the UK, they're not as vigilant as one would think. Whereas in South Africa, it was even less than that. They were never available to protect their greatest assets, and their greatest assets that any country can have is their children. And this is what made it quite both scandalous but tragic, is that children were not seen as a valuable asset. They were not seen as the future. And I think that's where things went horribly wrong at the time, is because they had created the new Mandela person. They had schooled him extremely well. They had him under wraps, but then also the children were not protected. They thought that you could go and play in the street. They thought that you could go and play tok-toki at night, you know, throwing the stones on people's roofs and things, and that nothing would happen to you. But actually, they didn't protect their own. They didn't protect their young. And this is where the problem came in. That's what allowed people like Van Rooyen and others like him, others fixers and finders, to be able to see which children were at risk, which children were not protected, and which children were out playing and playing ball, you know, that there's these little grassy areas and schools where you've got, you know, soccer fields, and you can play soccer and do all the things you need to do. They knew, because there were eyes and ears everywhere, because it's a multi-billion, not million, multi-billion rand organizations that runs through the whole of SA. All of South Africa has these tunnels, farms, places where they hide children. And Van Rooyen was just one of many, many finders and fixers. And he was actually taken out. He did not kill himself. He was there. It was one of those where he was taken out. He did take out his mistress, but he did not kill himself. He was actually taken out because he was told, this is it, end of the line. And one of those, this is it. This is your lot. Say bye-bye. This is it. You're going. And he was taken out. And there was actually, from what I understand from the discussions, there was something that was left in the room that was not found by the forensic team. If they had found that, they would have realized that he actually couldn't have done away with himself. It's not possible. But they didn't find the key evidence. And I think also knowing how everybody knows everybody else, and that's that spider. They all know each other. They would have made sure that the cleanup team was out there. Just as much from the hunt, I was doing the cleanup, there's a second group of people that do the cleanup, and they're the cleaners, and they will go and clean up the mess. It's the same situation. Nothing changes. It's exactly the same. It's the same principles. It's the same process flow. You do this, you do that, you clean up, that person cleans up that one cleans up that, and you just say, chup still. You close your mouth, you put a zip on it, and you don't say anything.
So these girls, I mean, obviously they were taken, obviously you explained last week as well, from the different areas, vulnerable girls, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what your opinion is on what happened to them and where they went to.
Well, because they were really young, the amount of steamers or jobs that they could have done. A steamer is somebody that's utilizing a child for gratification, shall we say. So the steamer, yeah, they call them steamers. Steamers.
I don't even want to think why are they called steamers?
Because
is that a stupid question?
You steam into something. You steam into something. You know what I'm trying to say without getting too graphic?
Yeah.
There we go. Graphic warning, folks. So yeah, the steamers.
Warning.
Yeah, well, yeah, best I can. I'm mooching around the outside as best I can. So yeah, so the steamers would then be asking for that age group of child. So those children would have first serviced, obviously, the perpetrator. That would have been the first person that they serviced, but those children would have done the rounds. They would have definitely been utilized on all sorts of jobs and kept wherever they needed to be kept and then brought back. That's absolutely common practice. You've got to make sure that whatever it is that you've managed to acquire as an asset, you've got to make sure that you sweat that asset and that it makes you as much money as it possibly can.
So who do you think these steamers were?
Probably, judging on where they were taken from and what he was involved with and who he was involved with, it would have been high-value individuals within the Freemasons. It would have been high-value individuals within politics, new parties. They always have quite a few medical, clinical specialists that are very high up. People like heart surgeons and, ear, nose, and throat surgeons, and
Heart surgeons.
Never know, people that own race horses, those sort of things,
Okay, hold the phone just for one New York minute.
Okay.
Heart surgeons. We had a very, very famous heart surgeon here, Dr. Chris Barnard, who was South Africa's, he was South African, and he in fact did the first heart transplant between a chimpanzee, successful heart transplant between a chimpanzee and a human. And interesting about that, my first cousin's husband was his 2IC.
Oh.
They both live in America now. So, okay, well, let me just find out about heart surgeons. Are we talking about the same heart surgeon?
There's a whole raft of heart surgeons that used to be involved with Grooteskier and did all sorts of things that had certain types of penchant, shall we say, both for little boys and little girls. And that same group or fraternity of individuals are especially sadistic and very involved in the underbelly, both of Cape Town, particularly around Grotties, Grooteskier Hospital, and others.
Why heart surgeons or medical specialists in particular? Because you say, I know in one of our previous chats, you kind of said the same thing. It's like they are particularly brutal, particularly sadistic, particularly, why? Why? What do you think that's about?
Why do you think you need a heart surgeon to be able to be present with children that are being unalived? What do? You would need to be able to get a shot of adrenaline into the heart of a child to bring them back around. You need to be able to disassociate and push that energy. They need you to create lots of different personalities so that you can control those personalities from the child. So that way that they do that is they basically unalive you. But you need to have somebody who is extremely well versed in being able to get that old ticker going again so that there's no mistake, so that the asset that you have either purchased or that you've acquired, so that asset can go on to do all sorts of other work. So including things like acting totally different, have a completely different personality, because the more personalities the children have, the more opportunities you have to make money out of that child. If you've got just a child that's a whimpering child that will, freeze because this is what's happening to him or her, that's just one income stream. But if you have a child that is now MBD, multiple personality disorder, because you've brought that child into a frame of crossing over, but then you brought that child back through a shot of adrenaline to the heart, that means whatever personality it comes back with, that's another personality. And I've seen this, that you have, some of the children have 3 or 4 personalities. So you've got the whimpering child. Okay, that's fine, Goldilocks. You've got the whimpering child. But then you can quite easily bring about the other personalities. So you get those that are, the child that is the dolly, or you get the child that is that wears all the black leather and the black this and the black that and wears a mask and whatever, and then becomes this cheeky little imp that can get chased around wherever. So, these are different personalities. They are different personalities, completely different personalities that come in. So possession, demonic possession at its best. But you need somebody who knows how to control the environment, who is clinically trained, who's part and parcel of the establishment, so that you don't lose the asset. And that would be that type of person. So someone who understands how the heart works and exactly where to push that needle into the chest, which is very painful. How you would push that into the chest to restart the heart. That's why you have them.
So this child literally gets unalived a couple of times, every time brought back to life
and split
with an adrenaline shot. Yeah, and then there's another split that occurs, which then has another.
Yes, multiple personality disorder at its best, but great for sales. Because if you want the whimpering lamb, you've got the whimpering lamb. But if you want the dolly that dresses up like the dolly with its little tutu on and does whatever, you've got that as well. And then you've got the nasty one, like Chucky on speed. You've got that one as well. So you've got at minimum three income streams with one child.
Yeah, Jessie was saying to us as well, one child she was saying is like worth $1 million from when it's taken to obviously the molestations and being paid for that, to eventually then having the child sacrificed, the organ harvesting. And depending, these kids, we told, are turned into diamonds as well. The Vatican, they're literally incinerated. And sometimes, their remains are put in our food and in the cement, in the buildings at these Freemasons. It's all cursed, of course. So the remains of the kids, that's why we don't see the remains, right, of the children, because they are. And typically that their remains will go in the more grainy type of organic, natural
cement
food.
And cement too.
Isn't that crazy?
Cement
absolutely.
Is, it's very, very difficult to find any traces of human remains in cement. Extremely difficult. It's the same as with the boys. Unfortunately, the boys, they're not breeders. They're never going to be chosen as breeders. But the girls, you can still go on to become a breeder and live your life in a cage and popping out babies, which does happen. But the boys are the most unfortunate ones, because once they've got to the point where they're no longer useful, a lot of them will either go on to that track where they're on the sacrificial track, or the other thing that was very prevalent during that time in SA was the snuff movies. And the snuff movies a lot of the boys are in the snuff movies, and those that are doing the rounds on the dark web, some of those were shot in South Africa. Some of the films were created and shot in South Africa. And those children that you see in those movies, they were unalived for real. That wasn't acting. Those are real children passing away. And that is what a snuff movie is. So that in itself was also multi-million rands. And that was very much part of the boys. The boys, you could have 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you could shoot all sorts of movies in maybe 2 weekends or something. And it's a true crime that you're watching. It is something that is unfolding in front of you. And people that buy these movies, they know that it's a snuff movie. And you will get those that will, if you've got a handler, say, that owns, say, 3 or 4 or 5, you might decide, well, if I pay you 75 or 200K for that particular one, that one's going to star in a snuff movie. Come and drop that one, her, him, whatever, off. And this is the movie. This is what we're going to be doing. And that's it. Then that child is never seen again. And it's either the items are taken to the alligator farm, it's taken to the cheetah farm, or it's taken to one of the lion enclosures or something like that where the breeders are, or if they're not close to that. Big farm, and of course snake farm, one of the big snake farms. Or if that's not the case, then they just get taken to Bird Island if Bird Island is an option.
I actually had a dream/vision one night many years ago of things happening. I didn't even know at that stage that there were such things as underground military bases. But I saw stuff going on there. And I saw guys sitting like Die Wit Wolwe, the White Wolves, which is like South Africa's Ku Klux Klan. I saw them gathering under there. I saw all sorts of sexual activities going on there, noise, things moving, stuff like I would imagine product being trafficked, boxes, train tracks, I don't know, stuff like that. I don't remember, but it was and it going deeper and deeper. I didn't even know at that stage there was anything beneath the surfaces of the earth, right? Yeah. And then when I spoke to someone who was in the military, and he said, there are military underground bases, and like what? And then I was like, wow, that's exactly what I saw. So for me, I mean, would you concur that sort of stuff happens here as well? That there's
gosh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Also, remember, it's a very convenient feeding program because in the dumps, the deep underground military bases that are in SA, South Africa, is right on the lowest level. So it's level 6 and level 7 is where the visitors or the off-worlders are kept, or they are utilized, and they still need to be fed. They eat all sorts of things, but one of the aspects that they will do, and they do eat a lot of, is human beings, and particularly children. So it's very convenient that some of these individuals that run these bases, they get individuals delivered in crates, and there you go, bon appetit, that's your dinner. So it's just the same as it's exactly the same as feeding it to the snake park, or feeding it to the cheetah park where they have a breeding program. By the time it gets there, nobody really knows what it is. They don't know whether it's a kudu or a springbok, or unless its fur is still on there, the pelt is still on there. But sometimes they pass it off and say, well, it's either it's a cow or it's a pig or it's something else, and you don't always know exactly what it is that's being fed to these animals. And it's exactly the same situation. They have clearing areas which are specifically there to make sure that people disappear. They're very good at this. They will always make sure they cover their tracks. You will not be able to find too much about them unless you have somebody that was in one of the DUMBs, deep underground military bases, and can say, oh yeah, we took a shipment of, X amount of crates of children. But you would need to have somebody, an insider, that would whistleblow. And this is common across the world. If there was somebody that perhaps put in an order for X amount of children to be taken to another country, that happens too, because they have access to. There's one of the I think it was one of the ones that they had their own private landing strip, and they used to move things from there into one of the planes. Then they used to fly it out to one of the military bases, and then the military bases would then take that to the next point of collection, and that was all part of it. So when you start looking at, if you had a spreadsheet, which is what I did at one point, after 7/7, I then had this big book, and I started putting down all the lines, all the financial lines, what he was doing there, what he was doing here, what he was doing here, how much for the Snuff videos, how much stuff, films, it wasn't videos in those days, it was films, how much for moving children for feeding. So where is there the food cycle? So there was that. Then there was, the honey traps, which is the children that have been unalived significantly, so that they have multiple personality disorders. Then they were used for something different. They were used to be the ones that would be the honey trap. They would be the ones that would ask, you go and ask that question. When that uncle is with you, that's what you ask that question. And you come back to me and you come and tell me, what did that uncle say? And that's how the information goes through. And that's what these children are. Because they've got 3 alters, 3 different personalities, 3 alters that are in there, they can send any of those.
That's unfreaking believable. That, just the way you're explaining it, and with the heart surgeons and the physical, it's because I've never thought about it like that. I mean, I obviously understand they do a lot of terrifying, and even when they're just traumatizing the kids, that they're not going to unalive, but they're splitting their personality, right? They're creating that division. I mean, the fact that there's that physical trauma involved as well, of having adrenaline injected into, and every time there's another alter that comes in. I mean, wow, that is unbelievable as well. When you talk about level 6 and 7 visitors and otherworldly creatures of the night, can you expand on that at all as to what that could be? What have you seen there? What do you know that there's there?
The DUMBs have got different levels, and the very, very bottom levels are the ones they're built bigger, wider, taller, because they can encompass the different types of requirements for off-worlders. So the very, very bottom is rather large. It's huge. So because some of those beings are, some of them are 15 feet, some of them are 20 feet tall, and they need to have an environment that's climate controlled, atmospherically controlled, but also an area that most individuals would not have that clearance to be able to go right down to the bottom. So most personnel, from what I remember from the 2 people that I've met personally that used to work in them, had said, one of them particularly, he never had clearance to go right down to the bottom, but he did see some unusual happenings. But the other one did have clearance to go down to the bottom. And he unfortunately has got cancer that started in his shoulder recently. So I think he'll probably not be with us for much longer. So yeah, and he was talking about what he saw, how they were working with things, and the different types of languages that were on the walls. And then they went as far as having these areas where food would be dropped, or that you could go and have food and be with these off-world visitors, as well as areas that they would have meetings and discussions. And it became, for him, he was like, well, I'm used to it now. When you first meet them, the smell is the first thing, and the second thing is the size of them. They are huge, and you do feel a little bit, that you should be a little bit more careful about what you say and how you say it and where you go, because it's like almost that their eyes are always on you. Their eyes are always watching you. They're very definitely predators. So, and he had said he'd seen a lot in his time, and he had seen children being moved and being brought in with full cages or full racks, as they say, and the racks would then go out with nothing in them. So we don't just have humans that are giving children what's left of them to our beautiful animals, lions and cheetahs and alligators and snakes. But then what's even worse is there's this other opportunistic level of individuals that are predators off-world, that are here and are totally under the radar. You never see them.
Totally. I think a lot of these things are cryptids as well that are being created in these underground laboratories, and definitely require children as part of their food source as well. Now, a big question I want to ask you, Beverli, is Bird Island. Now, just to give some context, Bird Island is kind of like what we would, I guess, call South Africa's Epstein Island. There's been a book written.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is. Yes, I agree with you. Yes. Oh, I didn't think of it that way. You're very clever.
Well, I mean, it's like there have been a lot of, in fact, there's a book being written on Bird Island by two previous journalists. And the one has been committed suicide, right? And in fact, I spoke to a journalist. This girl was at school with me, and she was at the time Mandela's personal journalist. I don't want to mention her name, but she was all over SABC News at the time, and she traveled with him. She was his personal journalist. And I spoke to her a couple of years ago because, as I said, I actually know her from school.
Oh, wow.
And I told her, I asked her about the Bird Island stuff, but boy, was I met with defense. No ways, that didn't happen. These people are not, I was like, whoa, okay. So I know at the time, these two journalists who wrote the book on Bird Island, there was a big division in the whole media industry at the time because of this book. And of course, what this book points to, I actually have a copy of it. I have not read it. I actually am avoiding reading that book like the plague. But it talks about our politicians like Magnus Milan and Pik Botha and the boys also going off to this island off the east coast near Port Elizabeth, South Africa, not far from where I am actually, and having their way with young boys. And in fact, where I heard that correct me if I'm wrong, one of the young colored boys was shot up the anus with a 9mm gun, and somehow he survived. And that guy spoke, that kid spoke. That's one of the stories. I did hear that, so I'm not sure. I've not read the book, but I think maybe we should do a book club on Bird Island, Beverli.
I think it's a good idea because it's that's I hate to say it, but being shot with a .22, that's common. So that's not frightening at all. That's a common occurrence, being shot in the bottom.
No, come now. What do you mean? It's a common occurrence. Why exactly like that? Why exactly is it a common occurrence that young boys get shot with a gun up the bum?
Because it probably was filmed, from what I understand. It would have been part of the Snuff movies, definitely. And that is, that is, if you understand the perpetrators and these sadistic individuals, that is part of their modus operandi. This is something that is, it's the most degrading that they can think of. And at the end of whatever play they've had with this young person, and because it is being filmed, usually in a Snuff movie, the person that is being played with, they are unalived. But we've got many ways in which you can unalive a person. There's loads. I mean, I can think of at least 10 just like that I've actually personally witnessed. I haven't witnessed that particular type of execution, but I know there are many, many Snuff movies with exactly that type of execution in them.
Are you saying that part of Bird Island was where they would do these types of Snuff movies? Would they
I
make
think there
them
must
there?
have
What do
been
you know
Snuff
about
movies.
Bird Island?
I just know the
Makes
different
sense.
types of individuals that would be utilizing Bird Island. It's a place where individuals, you can hide very easily there. And if you have access to either a helicopter, well, helicopter mainly, you can get to and from Bird Island very easily under the radar without anyone knowing, particularly if you fly low enough.
So what types of individuals that you know of were frequenting that? Can you speak to that at all? I mean, I understand you can't speak about everything.
Those that are no longer with us. So I know Pip Werther definitely had a lot to do with that. He had a penchant for young boys. So it's those types of individuals at that level. But also there's businessmen. If I think about what was in his book, because there wasn't things like, phones that you could type things out. He had a book, and that book went with him everywhere. It slept with him. It was everywhere. He never, ever, ever let that book out of his sight. And he'd have all the phone numbers, and then he had a code for who liked what. And he was always writing in that book, who it was that wanted what, who it is he serviced when the next service could possibly be due. So you go through cycles where there would be certain individuals that would be coming into the country and they would want X, Y, and Z, and that would be coded in his book. So, there were so many different types of people. How many upper echelons used to frequent Bird Island and the surrounding areas? I don't think there are many that were in South African powers and in the halls of justice, in some of the top hospitals. I don't think there are many of those that were right at the top of their game that weren't part of it or had participated, or even worse, witnessed something and done nothing.
Wow. I definitely want to read that book, The Lost Boys of Bird Island. In fact, I think it's downloadable on PDF. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure. I will check on that.
I think it's a good one. Yeah, definitely a good one.
Yeah.
Definitely a good one, because whatever information they have got, it will add to what I've said about Bird Island, and it definitely is something that if you're looking for the truth as a truth channel, it would be one of the best ones to have as a review, because they shoot straight from the hip. Apparently a lot of the information was not redacted, and a lot of the information was left to go through. I think because the publishers thought this information is so far out there and is so far off the wall that people won't believe it. They will believe that the whole Bird Island genre, if you like, because it's become a genre, that it was made up.
What is happening there on Bird Island now? I mean, have you remote viewed anything around there recently at all? What can you tell us from?
I haven't actually looked at anything with Bird Island. I've done more on Epstein Island than I have on Bird Island. So it might be one of the ones to start having a look at and see what is there? Yeah, I can see you now. You're definitely you're fixing for an investigation. So we've got the
And
Owl House, and now we've got Bird Island as well. We've got the two
we got
things
the
that we want to
Owl
do.
House,
Yeah, we've got
Bird
the Owl House
Island.
and Bird Island. So there we go.
We've got Psychic Investigations Supreme. Sappho Psychic Investigations are on the ball here,
I'm
Beverli.
up for it. I'm up for it. Yeah, I'm definitely up for it.
Totally, guys. And that I think is going to be something cool. We're gonna remove. I'll ask Beverli if she would like to or be prepared to remote view. Thank you, Lisa D. There we go. There's the link for Lost Boys of Bird Island. Yeah. And I don't think it's I think Miss Fiji was saying it's not available in South Africa anymore. So that must be, I see that's in dollars. But I definitely had that book downloaded somewhere. It's on, as far as I know, it used to be on PDF. I'm just going to look at it.
But I'll tell you what, I'm due to go to America, and I'm sure it's $110. So I'm definitely able to get a downloadable version. If I get it, then I will send you a link or a copy or whatever it is, however it is you send these things around. Yeah, if I manage to get it, I'll make sure that you get a copy of it.
Thank you so much. That is really, guys. Okay, on this channel, I love doing book clubs. I love doing book clubs often with the authors that actually write the books. So then we read the book and the author talks to us and blah, blah, blah. Beverli, I know we've got you lined up for that as well. Yes. But definitely, I think we are going to be looking at the Bird Island, the Lost Boys of Bird Island. I'm going to see first if I can get a copy. And then if we can get a link, because I know the one that I got you could download, but that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So they might have deleted all of that by now. But if we can get that one, let's get it, because honestly, this to me, and I know a lot of these disgusting monsters were after the colored kids and the African kids. And I mean, the white kids were certainly not excluded.
No.
But the colored kids and the African kids were their delight, and they treated them absolutely abominably. I am so sick and tired of these perverts coming from Europe and wherever they come from into these African islands. There was another one, I can't even remember the name of the island now as well, but the mothers are literally selling their boys to these perverts because that's the only way they get money. Yeah. So, one can get so infuriated with these things. How does a mother ever do that? But at the end of the day, if that's all you know, then I guess that's what you're going to do, right? So, but I think, reading these stories, when I started this channel nearly more than 5 years ago now, or 5 years ago, I could not believe the horrors I was hearing. One survivor after the other telling the most horrific stories. And one thing I know from the survivors is you guys that have been through these horrors have for the longest time never, ever, ever been believed, been gaslit and told that you are lying, you're crazy, you whatever. I don't want to imagine all the insults that must have come your way and the abuse that comes your way for daring to speak up, right? And you amazing survivors are the voices for not only yourselves and your community, but those that did not make it either. And when we actually bring to light books like The Lost Boys of Bird Island, we actually honor the children that went through that hell, because I cannot imagine what those kids must have gone through at the hands of those disgusting predators. And our politicians were putrid in those days. They were putrid. Who else do you know that was doing shenanigans?
Wow, there's quite a lot of them, and you've got various items like the de Klerk Brigade as well. That was just a joke in itself, because he was making all sorts of deals here, there, and everywhere. He was trying very hard to be able to maintain some level of control, but I think that was rapidly fading. And most of the individuals that, in Pretoria particularly, you could see that they were literally just shuffling around like these little grey men that they were. And that when everything started to change, there were those that were saying, well, now what's going to happen to me? What happens to everything that I knew that was part of my time? What do I do with the documentation? What do I do with the photographs? What do I do with what I know? So you had this flurry going on, crazy people that were, tearing up things, that were shredding stuff, that were, taking things out in bags to go and burn on a fire, because they knew that things were changing to such a degree that they could not possibly leave that where it was, because if it was ever found, you had then a direct trail. I always say to everybody, if you're investigating something, follow the money, because at the end of the day, Patrick Daniel Rhodes and his cronies and everybody that was all part of this fabric that he created, it was all about the money. Follow the money. And if you start following the money, you can find a trail. There will always be a money trail somewhere. And this is what he had done, is he had then said, we've got to help these people get things out. And it became a common occurrence up to the time when there was the change in the government. People were like rats out of a sinking ship. They were getting everything out, all the evidence out, all the documents out, photographs were being burnt, everything was being burnt, because they were so scared that everything that they had built on the top of this dung heap would come to light. And that's what they were doing. They were covering their backsides, which is what they did extremely well.
Well, I think they can only cover their dirty bums for a short amount of time, because really, when it comes to truth and lies, truth always surfaces. I mean, it might have taken a long time, and unfortunately a lot of people suffered through those heinous crimes.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's why, as I said, people like you are here to give those kids a voice, and those, not just the kids. I'm sure there were a lot more than kids as well. Wow. Okay, well, listen, I know I've now had you for a long time tonight, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Is there anything, I know we've spoken about, anything more about Bird Island that you want to just wrap up with?
We can have a look at Bird Island, because I know that the energies of Bird Island, I looked at it briefly, but I never went to Bird Island. I did know people that used to frequent the area, because obviously being in that business, if you have been given a job to do, and those people had been to Bird Island before, then you hear things, you hear children that come back, or young people that come back, and they say, oh, this is what happened, and I heard this story. And when you're being transported, you do talk amongst yourselves. Mostly it's about food and about what are you going to eat, what are you going to drink, should you be drinking, and that we never really ever spoke about what it was that we were being forced to do. It was like an unwritten rule that you just, you don't talk about that. But what you talk about is the nice things, like, what food do you think we're going to eat? Do you think we'll get something nice to eat? Do you think we'll be allowed to eat? It's those sort of discussions. But occasionally you'll have somebody that will say, oh, we went to this funny place and this is what this happened. And you will get, so these little tiny snippets of information that come back, and you hear them, and eventually after the years you think, hang on a minute, I wonder if that was Bird Island that they were talking about. And this is what happens. It churns around in your mind, and then suddenly you start piecing information together, and you start realizing, that's what they were talking about. And of course, with Google Earth, you can look at these places now. You can look from the top, you can look down. And that's what I was doing, is I was looking at things to think, well, what is that? How does that make sense? is there something like that? Like as if you would look at the owl house. If you look at the owl house from the top, from the satellite, it looks very different to when you're standing on the ground and you're seeing all the statues. It's exactly the same with Bird Island. So it would be interesting to have a review just on what was happening at Bird Island, what's been in the book, and how much of that I'm able to RV, because I'll need a couple of like key coordinates to say, right, we want you to go to there, and then I can go there and have a look and see what do I see at that particular point, shall we say. I'm sure we'll get that out of the book once we find the book.
Lisa D has just put the PDF up, so thank you so much for that. That's the PDF, guys. So if you can go download the Lost Boys of Bird Island, South Africa's Epstein Island. We're definitely going to be delving further into that, because that's, of course, where our top politicians in the 80s, 90s, I guess, as well, and before. I don't know what goes on there now. I know these guys up here are far from innocent as well. They're as dodgy as their white counterparts, and have also been sold out and all sorts of things. I have no doubt about that. All you got to do is look at Nelson Mandela's virtual signaling with his hand signals and stuff, and we know, So thank you so much, Beverli, for that, and thank you, Lisa D.
Yes, that's a good find for the PDF. I want to go and download that. That's for sure. I want to have a look too.
$110 is a lot of money, and I agree. People should be rewarded if they've put out stuff like that. Absolutely, but if it's not available, there it is on PDF. Somebody's put it on PDF, and I just think more than anything right now, it's about the knowledge. We need that knowledge. We need to know what these people have said, and honestly, let these journalists not die in vain. Let people not die any further. We are no longer muted. We should call our show Unmuted, Bev.
Unmuted, yes.
Unmuted.
I think that's a good one. The Unmuted.
Unmuted. And, to speak about these atrocities, my word. And I found it especially interesting what you were saying at the beginning about today. I don't know if all of you caught the beginning of the show, is the 20-year anniversary of the 77 London underground bombings. And Beverli was sadly involved in that. But on a good note, that's exactly the thing that allowed her memories to surface again, so that she could speak with us on these topics. But and from the bombing, the 77 bombing to the 9/11 bombings, 911 days. I mean, that is insane. There's something there. There's so much going on. We know our guys here very much linked to the Nazis, Hitler, etc., but so much more as well. So lots to share, guys. Lots to share. Bev, I want to say thank you so much. Is there anything you still have to say, or maybe just something you want to close off for us with this evening?
I want to say just to remember in your prayers, because today is the 20th anniversary of the 7th of July London bombings. Just remember in your prayers all of those that lost their lives on that day across the different bomb sites, but also for those that are still struggling with survivor's guilt and struggling to keep their head above the survivor parapet and not actually succumb, because there's so many that have since passed away from survivor's guilt. So just bear in mind and light a candle and just remember all of those that have fallen. And more importantly, all of the children that have fallen as well. Because, I'm way past 60 now, heading up towards 70. There are those that I remember that I never saw again. And let us try to remember and light a candle for those children that have unfortunately given their lives inadvertently. They probably never wanted to end that particular way, but let their sacrifice not be in vain, because these sadists, they cannot win forever. Eventually they will lose. Eventually light will always shine through. And I think we're on the up and up now. We're on the final piece towards the final goal, which is for the truth to come out and to find, maybe bring these children home, whatever's available of them, and those that perhaps are already still in the system, bring them home. But let us not forget that this is still happening. This is not something that is in the past. This is something that is part of our current time, and it will continue in our future unless we stop it. So be the difference, make the difference, be part of this and make the difference, save the children.
Absolutely. 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 It is right. And I think it's so much is surfacing even now, you know. And the more light we shine on these topics, these guys, of course, scurrying like cockroaches right now to hide and dive and do whatever. So sometimes they can even be a lot more dangerous now than because they being discovered. So we absolutely have to be alert, be aware, keep your vibration high. This is all about your spiritual vibration. You know, you've got to stay in alignment with source. You have to do your prayer, your meditation. You have to, it's nothing else other than a frequency thing right now. Your frequency is the combination that opens up the fifth dimension, or beyond for you. However you choose to see it. I don't really care. I don't judge what people think about in terms of who they wish to pray to or what their spiritual belief is. As long as you're not hurting anyone, for me, God is available to us or for us, and we all choose to see God in our own unique way. And that to me is beautiful. So send light, send love, be cool, be kind. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled, man.
Be present.
And take care. Yeah. Be present, be aware.
Thank you, Chantelle, and thank you to everyone in the chat.
It's such a pleasure having you, Beverli. You're a wealth of information. And guys, you can check on the bottom there, Beverli's information over there. Is there are there any other shows you're doing that you want to tell our viewers about where they can catch you?
And we're doing on Wednesdays, we're doing an unusual type of show. It's called True Crime with a Twist. So what we're doing is all my colleagues around the world that look at these different serial killers is to look at the energies around those serial killers and to look at whether or not those serial killers could have been possessed, whether they could have had, you know, a galactic person involved in them that had taken over part of their soul, and just look at, you know, were they meant to be part of that? Was that part of their soul plan? Was that part of their path? So it's a very different type of true crime. And that is happening on Wednesdays on my channel. And then we will be bringing back, by popular demand, we will be bringing back the Saturday Psychic Live, which I used to have in South Africa, and then it was brought about by, and yeah, it's one of those. So you can just have rapid fire questions that you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee, and you can ask a question, and whoever the readers are going to be on the panel, they'll be different every week, but they can then take your question, do a card spread, maybe a tarot, maybe oracle cards, maybe runes, whatever the case is, just something exciting, something different on a Saturday night. So the Saturday Psychic Live will be coming back by popular demand.
I remember that so well. I remember those days.
It was fun. It was fun. So we're bringing it back.
There are a lot of people. Yeah, awesome. And there's a lot of people actually in the chats that remember and actually had readings with you many moons ago. So it's
I'd love to meet some of them. I'd love to meet some. I don't see who's in the chat, but yes, I think that would be really nice. And yeah.
Yeah, well, all Beverli. It's so cool. All Beverli's details are right there. And And guys, I will be back with Beverli again next week, Monday. We will progress this journey. So for those of you who still have questions and we're still getting to certain things, we're going to speak about definitely certain local high-level people, whether it's celebrities or politicians or stuff. We're definitely getting there. We're going to talk more about the organization of the child transportation rings, for want of a better word. So much to be aware of, and I'm so grateful that we are able to share this awareness in South Africa. Finally.
Yes, and everyone in
Thank
South
you.
Africa, make sure you got enough electric and have your gas stoves going, and just keep the faith, because you're still a very creative but still very naive nation. So keep looking out for present danger, because it's still there. They're still operating. They're still doing the same thing. Keep your children close. They are the most precious assets that you could ever have in your whole life. And if you're a granny or a granddad or an oma or an opa, keep those babies close to you. Make sure you know where these kids are. Don't let them go off and go somewhere, because these people are horrid. They will find them and they'll hups them. They'll take them. So keep your assets close. Keep your children close.
They will, most definitely. Most definitely. Okay, guys, time to love and leave you. And please give us a like, share, subscribe, share this information, comment. Just get this information out there. Just share. The more people who are aware of these atrocities going on, the more we can actually, just our knowledge, our awareness is what stops it. When you see a child in a precarious situation in a restaurant or anywhere, you will know now. You keep our eyes open. Your child is my child, and my child is your child. All the children belong to us adults to take care of. It's our responsibility to protect them all. Always hard.
It is.
And again, just for the last time, here's the link to The Lost Boys of Bird Island. Thank you, Lisa D, for popping that up. Awesome mods. Download it. I'm gonna chat to Bev. We're gonna definitely talk about doing something on that as well. But it's always nicer if we've read it or we're aware what we're talking of, and then we can all contribute to that. Perfect. Beverli, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Again, God
thank
bless.
you. And thank you to everyone in the chat.
Indeed. Take care, everybody. I will see you tomorrow at 2:00 with Juliet Rose Bryant, the South ex-model South African survivor who was a sex slave for the delightful Epstein. Gosh, I'm not laughing at her. I'm laughing at just another gruesome Jerry on the loose. So much of this nonsense. But anyway, let's hear what Juliet has to say. Very, very interesting. Take care, everybody. God bless you.